My stepdaughter used me as an ATM for 10 years. I paid $40K for her college and car, agreed to fund her $100K wedding. But when I found out they excluded me completely and featured her deadbeat dad as the hero, I canceled everything and left them with nothing. I'm 54 years old, work as an operations manager at a logistics company. And the truth is, I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago still has me processing everything, although now, looking back, I think it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I met Catherine about 10 years ago, 11 maybe, I'm not completely sure of the exact date, but it was summer. That I do remember. Catherine had a daughter, Christine, who at that time would have been about 13 years old. And from the first moment she made it clear to me that her daughter was her number one priority, which seemed perfect to me because I've always believed that's how it should be, right? A mother who puts her daughter first is a good mother. Christine's biological father, Patrick, had basically disappeared from their lives when the girl was about 5 years old. He would show up from time to time, promise things he never fulfilled, and then vanish again for months or years. Catherine told me the guy had never paid child support, that he forgot Christine's birthdays, that he was basically a ghost. But Christine, and this is what I never fully understood, absolutely adored him. Things with Catherine and me were good from the start. She worked part-time at a department store, but the money didn't go very far. I earned well, had my own house, and it seemed natural to help. At first it was small things, paying for dinner when we went out, buying things for the house, that kind of stuff. But after about a year, Catherine and Christine moved in with me, and that's when I basically became the provider of everything. Catherine quit her job, said she wanted to focus on being a full-time mom now that Christine was entering adolescence, and I agreed because, well, I could afford it all, and it seemed like having someone at home for Christine was good. The years passed, and I paid for everything, literally everything. Not rent, because the house was mine, but utilities, food, clothes, Christine's school expenses, her extracurricular activities, everything. Christine played soccer and did ballet, and that meant uniforms, classes, trips for tournaments, all that stuff. I never complained, honestly, because I saw her as my daughter even though technically she wasn't. I never adopted her or anything formal like that, but in practice, I was her dad. Or so I thought. She called me Benjamin. Never called me Dad, but she didn't call Patrick Dad either, so I figured she just wasn't one of those people who used those terms. Like some families are more formal or whatever. The weird thing, and looking back I should have seen it as the red flag it was, is that every time Patrick showed up, Christine would transform completely. The guy could have been absent for a whole year, without a call, without a message, nothing. And suddenly he'd appear with some made-up excuse, and Christine would act like he was the second coming of Christ. I remember one time, Christine would have been about 16. Patrick showed up after almost 2 years without contact, brought her a cheap stuffed animal he probably bought at a gas station on his way to the house. And she cried with emotion, hugged him, told him she had missed him so much. I was standing there thinking, this guy hasn't contributed anything. Doesn't even call her on her birthday, and I, who have been here every day for years, am basically invisible. But well, I told myself it was normal, that the biological connection is strong, that I shouldn't take it personally. Christine finished high school with good grades, applied to several universities, and when she was accepted at one that was about 2 hours away, Catherine and I talked about how we were going to pay the tuition. Catherine didn't work, had no savings, and Patrick didn't even know Christine was applying to universities because it had been months since he'd shown up. So, obviously it was going to be me who paid for everything. Tuition, books, housing, food, everything. Adding it all up, I ended up paying about $40,000 during the 4 years of college. $40,000. And that's not counting the car I bought her when she turned 20. A used 2018 Honda Civic in good condition because she said she needed transportation to get to her internships. During those college years, Christine would come home some weekends, and Patrick started showing up more frequently, maybe because Christine was already an adult and it was easier to look good without having to do the real work of parenting. I don't know. But every time he came, Catherine would invite him to stay for dinner, and I had to sit at my own table, in my own house, and listened to this guy talk about his plans and his projects that never materialized, while Christine looked at him with admiring eyes. I paid for the food we were eating, paid for the house where we were sitting, had paid for the clothes Christine was wearing, but Patrick was the hero of the story. Christine graduated from college about a year and a half ago, got her degree in business administration, and then came back home because, according to her, she wanted to take some time to look for the perfect job. Some time that turned into 6 months, then 9, then a year. She was living in my house without paying rent. I kept paying for everything, and she basically did nothing except send out a few job applications here and there and spend time with her boyfriend, a guy she met in college who also didn't have a stable job, lived with his parents just like Christine lived with me. About 8 months ago, Christine came home all excited, saying that her boyfriend had proposed and they were going to get married in August, specifically August 3rd. Catherine was crying with happiness, hugging Christine, and I felt happy for her too, honestly. I asked her if they already had plans for the wedding, and Christine said she wanted something big, elegant, because she had always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding. Catherine looked at me, and I immediately understood what was happening. Christine expected me to pay for the wedding, just like I had paid for everything else for 10 years. I asked her how much she was thinking of spending, and Christine started talking about venues that cost $5,000 just to rent the place, catering at $150 per person. A photographer who charged $3,000, a wedding dress for $4,000, and basically she was describing a wedding of about $80,000 or $100,000. I was quiet for a moment, doing the mental calculations, thinking about my savings account, my retirement plan, and then I told her yes, that I would pay for the wedding. Catherine hugged me, Christine hugged me, and in that moment I felt good. I felt like the dad who made his daughter's dreams possible, even though she had never called me dad. The following months were chaos of wedding planning. Christine and Catherine spent hours looking at magazines, visiting venues, trying cakes, all that stuff that apparently is necessary for a wedding. I signed the checks, gave my credit cards, and basically was the bank financing everything. The guest list grew to 250 people. 250 people I had never met for the most part. Christine's friends from college, Catherine's distant relatives, random acquaintances. When I asked Christine if I could invite some people from my side, she told me, sure, that I could invite whoever I wanted. I told her I'd like to invite about 20 people. My friends from work, some cousins, my brother who lives in another state. That kind of people. Christine frowned and said she would see what she could do. That the list was already pretty full, but that she would try to accommodate my guests. I gave her the names and addresses of the 20 people and assumed everything was settled. A couple of weeks later, I was at work when my friend Timothy, one of the 20 I had put on the list, called to thank me for the wedding announcement. I asked him what he meant, and he said he had received a card in the mail announcing Christine's wedding, but it didn't come with a formal invitation. It was just an announcement like, we're getting married on this date, but without an invitation to the event. I was confused. Told him it was surely a mistake, that obviously he was invited, and that probably the formal invitation was coming separately. That night I got home and asked Catherine about the invitations. She got nervous, started stammering something about how they had had to make some cuts to the guest list because the venue had a capacity limit. I asked her specifically about my 20 guests, and she finally admitted that none of them had been included in the final list. I asked her why, and she said that Christine had decided it was more important to have her friends and family, and that my friends didn't really know Christine anyway, so it didn't make sense for them to come. I stood there, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. I was paying for a wedding of almost $100,000, and I couldn't invite a single person I knew. I told Catherine that wasn't fair, that I was paying for everything and deserved to be able to invite my friends. She got defensive, said it wasn't about money, that it was about Christine's special day, and that I was being selfish by wanting to make it all about me. I went to my computer and looked for the wedding announcement they had sent to print. I found it on Christine's desk. It was an elegant and expensive card, obviously paid for by me, and when I read it, I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. The card said something like, Patrick Johnson and Catherine Martinez are pleased to announce the marriage of their daughter Christine Johnson. The guy who hadn't paid a cent, who had abandoned Christine repeatedly, who had contributed absolutely nothing, was listed as the father announcing the wedding. I, who had paid $40,000 for college, who had bought her car, who was paying for her wedding, who had supported her for the last 10 years, wasn't even mentioned. I showed Catherine the card and asked her what this meant. She went pale and started explaining that it was traditional for the biological parents to be the ones to announce the wedding, that it didn't mean anything, that it was just a formality. I asked her if Christine knew my name didn't appear on the card, and she nodded, said that Christine had personally approved the design. The next few days were tense in the house. I was angry, very angry, but I didn't say anything more because I didn't want to ruin Christine's wedding. I kept paying the vendors' bills, kept signing checks, but something inside me had changed. I started seeing things differently, noticing how Catherine and Christine talked about the wedding as if it was only their business, as if I was simply the ATM that financed everything without having a voice or vote. About 2 weeks before the wedding, Christine's boyfriend's parents organized a dinner at their house to celebrate the union of the families. Catherine and I went. Christine was there with her boyfriend. Patrick was also there because apparently he was now an official part of the family again. The dinner was awkward from the start. The boyfriend's mother, Judith, was one of those women who talks too much and has opinions about everything. We were eating when Christine stood up and said she wanted to make a special announcement. She said she had decided who was going to walk her down the aisle, and that after thinking about it a lot, she had chosen her father, Patrick, because he was her hero and had always been her inspiration, despite the difficult times they had gone through together. She said this while Patrick stood up and hugged her, and everyone at the table applauded and said, "What a beautiful moment it was." I sat there, feeling my blood boiling in my veins, watching this guy, who had never done anything for Christine, receive the honor of walking her down the aisle at a wedding I was paying for completely. Catherine touched my hand under the table, like trying to calm me down, but I pulled it away. I waited for everyone to finish congratulating Patrick and Christine, and then I raised my wine glass and said I also wanted to make an announcement. Everyone went quiet and looked at me, and I said, with the calmest voice I could maintain, that I was very happy that Patrick was going to walk Christine down the aisle, and that I was sure he would also be happy to pay for the wedding since he was the father of the bride. The silence that followed was absolute. Christine looked at me with wide eyes. Catherine went pale. Patrick looked confused. I continued, saying that I was withdrawing all funding for the wedding, that I was going to cancel all contracts with the vendors I had signed, and that I was going to recover the deposits where possible. I said that if Patrick was the father who deserved the honor of walking Christine down the aisle, then he should also have the honor of paying for her wedding. Didn't they think that was fair? Christine started crying. Catherine tried to interrupt me, but I kept talking. I told them that for 10 years I had paid for everything, absolutely everything, and that I hadn't received even basic recognition. I told them that my own friends weren't invited to a wedding I was financing, that my name didn't appear on the announcements, and that now I discovered I wasn't going to have any role in the ceremony either. I asked them what exactly I was supposed to be in this equation, other than a walking wallet. Patrick tried to say something about how he didn't know I was paying for everything, but I interrupted him and told him that was exactly the problem, that he had never known anything because he had never been present, never asked, never participated. I told him that if he wanted to start being Christine's father now, perfect. But that included the financial responsibilities too. I got up from the table, told Catherine it was time to go, but she stayed seated and said she wasn't going to leave with me, that I was ruining the most important day of Christine's life. I told her she could do whatever she wanted, but that I was leaving. I walked out of that house, got in my car, and drove back to my house feeling a strange mix of rage and relief. That night I couldn't sleep. Catherine didn't come back to the house, called around midnight to say she was going to stay with Christine because she was very upset. The next day, when I got home from work, I sat at my computer and started making calls. I called every vendor I had hired for the wedding, the venue, the catering, the photographer, the florist, the band, everyone. I explained the situation and canceled everything. Some of the contracts had cancellation clauses that meant I lost the deposits, several $1,000s in total, but I didn't care. Other contracts allowed me to recover some of the money, and I transferred that back to my savings account. I also went to the bank, where Catherine and I had a joint account where I deposited money for household expenses. There was about $15,000 there. money I had put in to pay bills and various expenses. I closed the account and transferred all the money to my personal account. Technically, it was legal because my name was on the account, and the truth is that money was mine anyway. I was the one who had deposited it. When Catherine finally returned to the house 2 days later, with Christine, they found me in the living room watching TV as if nothing had happened. Catherine immediately started yelling at me, saying I had ruined everything, that Christine was devastated, that the wedding was completely canceled, and it was my fault. I told her very calmly that I hadn't ruined anything, that I had simply decided not to pay for a wedding where I wasn't even invited to bring my friends or recognized in any way. Christine was crying, saying I was cruel. How could I do this to her when there were less than 2 weeks until the wedding? I asked her if she and Patrick had considered that maybe they could pay for the wedding themselves, or at least a more modest version. She said Patrick had no money, that he was between jobs, which was code for he's unemployed again, and that she also had no savings because she had never gotten a job after graduating. I suggested that maybe she could get a job now and save for a future wedding, but she just cried harder. Catherine told me I was a monster. How could I be so cold to a girl I had raised? And that's when something in me broke. I told Catherine that I hadn't raised Christine, that I had paid for Christine, that there was a huge difference. I told her that a father-daughter relationship wasn't just about money, that it was about respect and recognition and love, and that I had never received any of that from either of them. Things escalated quickly. Catherine said that if I felt that way, maybe she and Christine should leave the house. I told her that was fine with me, that they could leave whenever they wanted. I didn't expect them to actually do it. Honestly, I thought Catherine would eventually calm down and we could talk, but that same night they started packing. Christine called Patrick, who showed up with his old truck, and the three of them started taking Catherine and Christine's things out of my house. I stayed in my study watching all this happen, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. 10 years of my life with Catherine, 10 years of acting as Christine's father, all ending in one chaotic night of boxes and suitcases. Catherine passed by my study at some point, looked at me with tears in her eyes, and told me I was going to regret this, that I was destroying a family. I told her you couldn't destroy something that never really existed. They left around 2 in the morning. Patrick, Catherine, and Christine got into the truck, loaded with all their belongings, and went to Patrick's house. As I learned later, the house felt strangely empty and quiet when they left. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept well. The next day I hired a locksmith and changed all the locks on the house. Technically, Catherine had never owned any part of the house. Her name wasn't on the deed, so legally I didn't have to worry about anything. But I wanted to make sure there was no future drama with her entering the house without warning. The following days were a constant bombardment of calls and messages. Christine would call me crying, asking me to reconsider, saying she hadn't understood how important it was for me to be recognized, that they could change the cards, that I could invite my friends, whatever I wanted. I told her it was too late, that I had already canceled everything. She hung up on me, screaming that she hated me. Patrick called me a couple of days later, trying to sound reasonable. He told me he understood I was upset, but couldn't we find a solution? I asked him what kind of solution he had in mind, and he suggested that maybe I could pay for half the wedding and he would pay the other half. I asked him where he was going to get the money if he didn't have a job, and he admitted he was thinking about getting a loan. I told him that sounded perfect, that he should get a loan for the whole wedding then, not just half. He started getting angry, saying I was being ridiculous, that he was Christine's father and I was just Catherine's boyfriend. I told him exactly that I was glad he finally recognized that, and I hung up on him. Catherine wrote me long and emotional messages saying Christine was devastated, that she was depressed, that I wasn't coming out of her room, that all this was my fault. I responded asking her when she was going to accept that part of the blame was theirs for having treated me like an ATM for a decade. She stopped responding after that. Christine's boyfriend's mother, Judith, called me one afternoon to tell me I had ruined her son's plans, that they had also made preparations for the wedding, that her family had bought plane tickets they now couldn't use. I told her that if they wanted to organize a wedding, go ahead, but don't involve me in their plans either financially or in any other way. She told me I was a horrible man and hung up on me. I received a letter from Catherine about a week after they left. It was a long letter, handwritten, where she basically blamed me for Christine's depression, for ruining her dreams, for being vindictive and cruel. She said she had thought I was different, that I was generous and good. But in the end, I was just another selfish man who needed to be a center of attention. I didn't respond to the letter. My friend Timothy called me about 2 weeks after all the drama to ask me if it was true that the wedding had been canceled. I told him yes, that I had withdrawn my funding and apparently Patrick couldn't or wouldn't pay for it. Timothy asked me how I felt about it, and I told him the truth, that I felt free. I felt free from a relationship where I was only valued for my bank account, free from being the invisible backup that nobody recognized, free from continuing to pretend I was part of a family that had never really accepted me. The weeks passed, and I started enjoying the solitude of my house. I could watch whatever I wanted on TV, eat whatever I wanted, not have to finance projects or plans that weren't mine. My bank account started recovering without having to pay for 2 additional people all the time. I realized that for 10 years I had been working not just to support myself, but to support Catherine and Christine. And now, all that money was for me again. Catherine sent me a message about a month and a half later to tell me that she and Christine were moving to another state. That Catherine had a sister there who had offered to let them stay with her until they found work. I didn't respond. Part of me felt a little sad. I'm not going to lie. 10 years with someone doesn't disappear easily. But another part of me felt relieved that everything was finally truly over. Timothy told me about 2 weeks ago that he heard somewhere that Christine and her boyfriend had indefinitely postponed the wedding. That apparently he got a job in another city, and Christine moved in with him without being married. Patrick, according to Gloria, a gossipy friend of Catherine's who ran into me at the supermarket, disappeared again after Catherine and Christine moved. Typical of him. Gloria tried to make me feel guilty, saying I had been too hard on Catherine and Christine. But I just shrugged and told her, everyone makes their choices and lives with the consequences. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, not in canceling the wedding. I'm sure that was the right thing. But in how I handled everything during those 10 years, I should have established boundaries from the beginning. I should have demanded respect and recognition instead of just assuming it would eventually come if I was generous and patient enough. I should have realized earlier that for Catherine and Christine, I was never going to be more than the guy who paid the bills. That Patrick was always going to be the idealized father, no matter how much I did, or how much he didn't do. But well, I guess sometimes you need to get slapped with reality pretty hard, to finally open your eyes and see things as they really are. I'm better now, honestly. I go out with my friends, those same friends who weren't good enough to be on the wedding guest list. I'm saving money again, thinking maybe about retiring early if I keep this up. The house is quiet, it's mine. And I don't have to share my space or my money with people who don't value me. A few days ago I was cleaning the study and found an old photo from about 8 years ago. Catherine, Christine, and me at an amusement park. Christine would have been about 15 in the photo. We were all smiling. I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to remember how I felt that day. If even then there were signs that I was just the financier and not a real part of the family. Probably the signs were there and I just didn't want to see them. I put the photo in a box with other things from those 10 years, stored it in the garage, and moved on with my day. Not with nostalgia, not with regret, just accepting that it was a stage of my life that ended and that I'm in a better one now. And that's enough for me.